Cyber Reapers. Hello, Cyber Reapers. So, tonight, or today, whenever, wherever you are, I would like to talk about a novella. Yeah, it's a novella this time, not a novel. So, in case the terminology is a little unfamiliar to you, novella refers to, well, there's like novelette, novella, novel. It basically just refers to the length of a story. And typically I read novels which are about 60,000 words over. Some people are it's a little fuzzy on where a novella becomes a novel. Sometimes I think the general consensus, though, I think is about 60,000 words. Maybe it's 40,000. Anyhow, though, anything shorter is generally referred to as a novella. Sometimes you might see varied terms for things that are even shorter. Like, say, longer than a short story, but maybe shorter than what people would consider a novella. And that, I think, is where I've heard the term novelette. Today, though, I'm talking about a novella. And this one is called The Black God's Drums by Djèlí Clark. This was super fun. I am amazed at just how much world building was in this story. There was so much. There was magic, there was science fiction, there was, fantasy, and like mythology, and also, what am I missing? Oh, like culture and history, so this story is set in New Orleans, but like an alternate timeline sort of New Orleans, and it's set back in the American Civil War. Sorry, I kind of fumbled on the word there. But yeah, so it's back in the 1800s, and, but it has, magic is like just like an acknowledged thing, that exists, I think. Same with, the science fiction-y stuff, because there's airships that are there, and so the technology is like kind of almost steampunk-esque. I think that's one of the tags that was on Goodreads for this story. So it's impressive how much world building was in this story, because the pacing was on point. It just kept going, but the exposition that was provided was it was plentiful. So I felt like this story was so rich. It had just so much in it. It had so much culture and a sense of place, and I just felt like this was such a vivid environment. And I think partially, or part of that, is that the focus was really on like one or two characters, and even so, the side characters still felt like they had so much character too. And I find that so crazy that can all just work so well, because the descriptions that were given, like for side characters, were concise, but like punchy. I don't know how to better describe that, but it was great. So it felt so rich. So like if you're looking for something to really just sit with for a bit and go, yes, this is a great, like, kind of, it's like a shorter than a novel length, so you get to like taste a really rich, vivid world, for like a kind of short period of time. I think it was maybe about 2 hours of reading for me. So like if you want about 2 hours of a really vivid world, this is a wonderful book for that. I say book, I don't know if they call it a book. I'd say book, novella, we'll say that. And it's just, it was so great. I was not expecting to be that engaged the entire time, but I was just so locked in because of much culture was in this world. And a lot of that, I think, comes from the representation as well. Because being set in New Orleans, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I have not been to New Orleans of this world. I wanted to. I was going to. Back in spring of 2020. You can guess how that turned out. So, I haven't actually been. And I've been curious about it. And I learned more about it during a music class in college. And so I started to appreciate its culture even more. Like, it's already rich and vivid in culture in this world. And the way that it's described, this alternate New Orleans, is also very, just so very vivid. Yeah. And there are so many people of color that are just like, it's just normalized in this book, and I wouldn't be surprised if in New Orleans that's similar. I'm sorry if that's not accurate, but at least in this book, it's very much like, yeah, people of color are everywhere in this book. I'm just gonna keep calling it book. Hopefully that's fine. In this story. And including the main characters. The main character, her name is Creeper. She is a black girl who lives on the streets. She knows the ins and outs of New Orleans. She earns her name, by climbing around on things, on buildings and trees, and just knowing her way around. And she doesn't have, her parents are deceased, and so she doesn't really have any family ties, or many friends. She knows people, though. I mean, she has connections. It's just mostly like informational kind of connections, stuff she can use to kind of to hear more about what's going on in the city, and to maybe use that information to bargain for a better life. And I'll get to the actual plot part in a bit. I just kind of want to warm up with like setting the atmosphere tone. Because yeah, that's our main character. She's bold. She's ready to just dive in and do dirty work. She's up for going into danger. I mean, she obviously is like trying to stay alive, and she's 13, so she's not trying to get involved in danger. She knows when to keep her head down, but whenever she has to, she is ready for it. So that's really cool. And yeah, so that's super cool. To follow her as a protagonist. And so, that's her. And do I want to talk about the captain yet? Yeah, I'll just mention there's a captain of an airship. She is like the second main character, I would say. And she's a black woman, a black queer woman, who like recruits a bunch of different people from like a bunch of different races, ethnicities, and she has a smuggling ship, and so she's adventurous, headstrong, she has confidence, and also I love the protective bond that forms, like that she starts feeling for Creeper, our main character, remember? And so yeah, the two of them are kind of the main characters, I would say. But before I started talking about them, I wanted to make sure I said everybody who is described, every single person described in this story has so much character to them. Even the background characters and side characters, like people who are mentioned like once. It's crazy, but it feels like, oh yeah, I remember these random background characters because of this specific trait about them, or something that happened with them. And especially the accents, the way that the accents are phonetically described, really just helps for narrating it in my head, for figuring out how each character talks. is super neat. I don't read a lot of stories that have accents phonetically spelled out. I think that's kind of a mixed... I think a lot of writers have a mixed opinion on whether you should spell out phonetically how accents sound, or if you just mention the accent that is being... how the words are being spoken. But I like it either way. Personally, I don't think I'm very good at phonetically spelling out accents, and that's why I don't do it in my own writing. But in terms of reading it, I like reading the phonetically spelled out ones because I probably won't be able to actually imagine what accent is being used. How the words sound. I won't probably pronounce them correctly in my head and keep the accent consistent throughout the story unless it's phonetically spelled out. And I remember, I think, the most recent other book I read like that, I think, was Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston. And in that book, that one I actually wanted to hear the narrated version for as well, and so I did a mix of both. I read it first with my eyes, and then I listened to it, and I found that both experiences were really neat for kind of internally narrating and then also hearing how the words are pronounced. So that was a really neat experience. I'd be curious to hear this book narrated as well. I wonder if there's an audiobook copy. I should look into that. Anyway, but yeah, the accents and also the way that words other than English are just kind of fluidly like weaved into the dialogue, especially French, because I mean New Orleans. So just the way that was weaved into the dialogue was super neat, and just it really felt like there was such vivid culture in this story, in New Orleans of this world, and I was just super invested in this sense of place, and the people there. And Creeper knows the ins and outs of this whole place. Maybe I can get to the premise now then. Cause yeah, Creeper knows the ins and outs of this whole place, which results in her overhearing a important transaction. So I think I maybe mentioned that this was still going on kind of in the American Civil War, or at least associated with that conflict. Associated with that war, I should say. I don't mean to minimize it by saying conflict. But I don't actually remember if the story said specifically what year it takes place in. So I don't entirely know if it's like right after or not. And I'm gonna be honest, they had exposition in there that explained what actually happened. And I think the idea is that, or the overarching idea is sort of the events of the Civil War played out kinda in the way that history did, but with a little more, I hesitate to say positivity, that's not it. New Orleans is neutral territory in this war, so there's like oh gosh, I'm really revealing my ignorance here. I don't actually know if that was true. I don't know if that happened in this world, if New Orleans was like neutral territory, or if that was just in the book. I assumed it was just in the book, but it might, for all I know, it could have been. Wow. Alright, I gotta review my Civil War knowledge then, because I remember the overarching broad strokes of what happened. I do not remember the details. I grew up in Texas, so I got the Texas education version of it. Yeesh. So really I have to go out on my own to brush up my history knowledge because, you know, Texas whitewashes it. Whitewashes history in general. And, you know, minimizes the actual horrific events that did happen. But yeah, now this book is inspiring me to go brush up on my American Civil War knowledge, because there were events in the book that I was going, okay, that didn't happen. And there were events in the book I was going, I think that happened, or maybe this is an alternate version of it. Regardless, there's more science fiction and more fantasy stuff, elements that came in that affected things. And yeah, it was a lot. It was super interesting, even without having super sure knowledge of the American Civil War events. I still got a lot out of this book and enjoyed a lot of this book. It was neat also how, like, historical figures were weaved into the story, like the mention of Harriet Tubman, right? Just like, it gave the book even more a sense of place, and it just felt very much like, yes, this is history, this is part of life, even though it's a fantastical world, you know, but the blending of the actual historical events, while incorporating the sci-fi and the science fiction technology and the magic, and also the magic technology. There's a bit of mix of all of that in there. It's just great. So, where was I? Creeper was overhearing a important discussion going on. This particular discussion was about a Haitian scientist who had who has the means of creating this really, really powerful weapon that combines technology and magic. And so it's a super dangerous weapon. And since there are conflicts still going on, wartime conflicts, whoever gets this weapon can change the course of whatever's going on in the war. So, Creeper overhears this, and partially out of wanting to use that information to bargain for a better life, and also partially Creeper realizes this information is super important to get to the right people. What she does is she seeks out somebody who can use this information. And this is the captain of the airship who I mentioned earlier. Because this captain has important connections and is just generally an important figure. And she might be able to help intercept this meeting that is being planned, where the Haitian scientist is gonna, show up and bring the plans for building this weapon and give them over to some people, and so some soldiers specifically. So Creeper goes and tells the captain of the airship about this, and in exchange Creeper asks, like, hey, can I travel aboard your airship? That's all I ask in return for this information. The captain's not so sure about that, because the captain's going, you're 13 years old, I don't really have a use for you on my airship. Shouldn't you even, be in school or something? But anyway, so they work together, though, to find the Haitian scientist and to prevent the weapon or the weapon plans from falling into the wrong hands. And what else can I say about that? Oh. Okay, so something important about all of this story. I mentioned mythology, right? So that's where this comes in, or this is where that comes in. I'm switching around my words, I'm excited. Because I need to read more stories with African mythology involved in them. And I have a couple of books on my list for where to start with that. But I was so happy to run into this one and go, oh hey, wait, there's African mythology in this. So anyway, so our main character, Creeper, right? inside her head, she can hear, like, the voice and receive, like, visions from an Orisha, African deity, named Oya. And Oya controls, like, storms and winds, if I remember right. Yeah, storms and winds. Also has other responsibilities, but specifically pertaining to this story, that's kind of, that has a lot to do with her role, and I think it's just easier for you to read the story in order to figure out how that ties in. But yeah, so Creeper just kind of has Oya constantly there, just has kind of this humming voice in her head, and I found it super neat, especially because anytime there's a story that has something that I can find a parallel to DID in that story, dissociative identity disorder, I have it. Anytime I find a story that kind of has a parallel to that, I love it. So, having a character who has a voice in their head that is like another character, that's a parallel. And there's a specific quote too that like Creeper says when describing Oya in her head, that I absolutely love, and so I'm gonna read that quote because it really resonated with me. The goddess can be fickle. Most times she got her own mind, pulling me one way while I'm trying to go another. We don't always see eye to eye, but not having her with me would be... I search for the right words. I would feel alone. And just that feels so... right. It resonates with me. Because having a system, it's kind of like that, I would feel alone if we didn't have this whole healthy multiplicity thing going on, and so that made me happy to read that, because that quote put it into words really well. Yeah. I think in the first time in forever, I actually covered all my notes without having to look at my notes. To be fair, I just wrote these because this story is fresh on my mind. I just read it today. Today and yesterday. My gestures are all funny right now, I guess. Today and yesterday. So it is fresh on my mind. I read most of it today, though. And so I'm still very, it's still very much altering my mind in a fun way. So, yeah, I actually said all the things I intended to say. That's awesome. And I think a few more things, too. And, yeah. Was there anything else that I wanted to make sure to say? I don't think so, because there was so much packed into this novella, that I think, I could have read a whole book of it, a whole novel of it, but it was really, really well done with the pacing as it is. I think it was a complete story. It was told in the amount of time that it should have been. So, yeah, I think I'll have to check out more of Djèlí Clark's works, because I noticed on his website that there are more books and stories. So this writing style is super amazing. So I think I'm gonna have to dive into his other stories now. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that for now. Okay, sorry, I'm still just so excited. That was so good. It was so good. Okay, yeah, okay. So, read it if you want that kind of experience, because, it was so good. Packed so much of a punch. I think I'll have to read it again at some point, too, so that I can, maybe after I brush up on, my American Civil War knowledge, because I think there's probably a decent amount that I'll appreciate more if I just have a little bit more history in my head. Yeah. listening. You are an awesome listener. And wherever you go next, whatever you do next, I hope that it is fun and or relaxing and or feels worthwhile to you. Ideally all three. Or three. Depends on if you're doing sign language or whatever is colloquially used for three.